Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports. Coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, and London, England, as well as Paris, France, of course. You good old boys in Canada, we love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more. There's the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful April the 8th, 2020. Grondo Deportes, Big C is out digging for gold again, actually taking care of some things down south. And it's all fair in love and war. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. Also, Big C Sports is powered by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic from 3,000 miles away, and he'll do his thing, and I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you gotta have a smart TV, Big C. If it's not smart, it's not gonna get the channels. It's all fair in love and electronics. I want to say there's so much going on in the world of sports, in the world of the coronavirus pause. Everybody's on the pause. Also, Masters is on the pause. There's a lot of good things that we're missing out on. Things that we really appreciate. Kind of like a nice meal. You really appreciate it. And when it's not there, you appreciate it even more, Big C. I want to make sure that we give out our Veterans Crisis Hotline. They are people who are experienced in helping veterans and their loved ones. And in today's time, everybody could use a little bit of help or someone to talk to. Make sure you're taking care of people that you know that are going through things and wish them the very best. And that's always important. I want to say a happy birthday to my niece also. So happy birthday to you. I know that life is fun and keep enjoying life and doing the very best you can. But I want to make sure we give out for our veterans, 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you're online, just go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net. And you can get some help. And I really appreciate the fact that that's out there, Big C. We just got to do our part in leading people to it. And I know if they just make the call. If you're going through issues and you can't make the call, maybe somebody can make it for you. I know it just takes a little bit of effort, and we can help a lot of people. Also launching a real estate TV show in the spring of 2020. The goal is to recruit 100 real estate brokers, put their property listings on TV, just like McDonald's does it, the same way car dealerships do it. Sports teams do it whenever we have sports. You can watch TV and let your real estate work on TV. I know in California they have an issue with open houses now. Governor Gavin Newsom came out and still made some more announcements about the shelter in place going up until, I believe, May the 1st of 2020. So a lot of people are just up in the air waiting to see what science says about how things are going for all of us. And we all got to do our part. But you know, baseball, the crack of the bat, not happening right now. But I do say, because of science, and again, whenever you hear news, you got to take a little pause, because we know some people want to give out the best news, even though it may not be scientifically factual. South Korean baseball, they're set to start in May, and may even hit the field as early as April 21st in Seoul, South Korea. New cases of the coronavirus falling in South Korea. The country's baseball league is targeting an early May restart, with teams ready to play preseason exhibition games as early as April 21st. That's, I believe the United States today topped over 14,000 fatalities. And of the testing, I believe there's been over 424,000 people that have tested positive for coronavirus. So that's less than 1%. It's like It's like a third of 1%. So anyway, science has its own way of figuring out things, but we've had people that had more of a calamity from different diseases, and it never shut down our economy. But I know we got to listen to medical science. But when you have less than 1%, even a third of 1% in fatalities, it just makes you want to pause and realize we still have to trust what medical science is telling us. On Wednesday in Seoul, South Korea, the country recorded 53 new infections, the third consecutive day that has been able to see cases around 50 and downward trend from February. I think the peak was 900. And so that increases the chances that the 10-team Korean baseball organization known as the KBO League not only started in May, but playing, they're saying, a full 144 games. Again, you got to take that with a grain of salt. I know there's a lot of Major League Baseball players that would love to get underway here in the United States, and there's even talk of playing down in Arizona in some kind of a bubble. And I don't know. I want to make sure that for what I do is I want to listen to medical science. I'm not a doctor. I may try to play one sometime when I'm talking to myself, but I realize that science is better than not. I want to just give out a fact for myself. I remember there was a time when I was walking about 5 miles a day, and I was doing it 6 days a week, and I was carrying around weights, some barbells in my hands. I had about 20 pounds walking around about 5 miles, and it really made me more chiseled. It made my body more appealing to me, a six-pack, and all those things that a lot of men are into, especially when you go to the gym a lot. But I also know that I dealt with high blood pressure. And I've tried the prayer. I tried even sometimes fasting the right way or changing how I ate. And nothing really worked. And I remember one time when I was walking through a store and I felt lightheaded. This was about 5 years ago. I felt lightheaded and my legs got numb and my chest was pounding like I had just finished running a marathon. And I remember how afraid I felt because I felt like I was going to pass out. Again, I've been walking 5 miles a day, 6 days a week. That's about 30 miles every day. You know, a jog. It wasn't like walking slow, but I was like light jogging and walking and then running intermittently. But even though on the outside I looked like I was in peak physical shape and I felt good, but that day that I had that anomaly, it scared me. And I remember I went to pick up my cell phone to call like 911 and my phone dropped out of my hand and the battery fell out of my phone. So, and I talked to Big C about my faith and prayer, and everybody has their own beliefs. But all I could do is pray and say, well, God, I don't want to, I want to live. I want to keep living. And so I just relaxed my mind. I got over to a seat, a chair, and I sat down. Actually, it was a bench inside of the store. And I didn't tell anybody. I just stood it. I just sat there in prayer. Now, some people say that's dumb. You should have called 911. Well, I tried to, but I dropped my phone, and the battery came out, and I just couldn't call anybody. I thought, well, let me just lay down on the floor. Somebody will come in here and help me. I didn't do that either. I sat there and I prayed. I waited for about 20 minutes until I got my act together. Long story short, when we hear about science and things may look good on the outside, I remember when I got my battery back into my phone, I drove myself to the doctor, which was just a couple of miles away from the doctor's office. So I drove myself to the doctor, and when they put me up on the machine, like I'm telling people now, we did this thing, why are African Americans succumbing to coronavirus more than other ethnic groups? And I could have been one of those stats because I refused to take my high blood pressure medication because I was going to pray my way to health. That was naive on my part, but as I know a lot of pastors, my grandfather was a pastor, my mother grew up in the church, so I had a lot of that church indoctrination growing up, even though we believed heavily in science. But I wanted to do everything I could to not have to take it. So I ignored science, like a lot of people are saying right now. Let's ignore science. I just want to see the game. I can't wait until baseball is going to have the crack of the bat again. I can't wait until the ball is bouncing up and down the court. I can't wait to see people play. And we hear that all the time. But like Big C is going through his thing right now, And I remember going through mine, and it's nothing to be ashamed about. We were talking about what can Surgeon General Jerome Adams do, because if he's African American, and we're being told that the African American community is being hit hardest by this coronavirus pandemic, I think a lot of black men were doing the same thing I did. Even though I had health insurance, I didn't trust that I couldn't do it on my own with my faith and with prayer. And I'm just saying, as naive as that sounded, that's what I did. And I know that I almost blacked out in the store one day about 5 years ago. And the scary thing about it is it was all preventable. Because since I started, I went to the doctor and did what science says, and I got on some medication. They kept me there for about 2 hours, running my vital signs, which is what a lot of people will find out when you go to the doctor if you have insurance. I just want to retract a little bit. When I showed up, they said, "Who's your insurance carrier?" So I told them, I gave them my insurance card, and everything was fine from that moment. That's why I'm embarrassed that President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence, they sit there and say how they really have a lot of concern for the American people as people are dying from coronavirus. And they have in lawsuits right now trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare, with the open enrollment that's already passed. Even Joe Biden asked them to open it up again. It was on a phone call just this week. I don't know if the answer was yes, but I haven't heard that they announced it. But as they're saying, we have, thoughts and prayers, and we pray for people, and we want to make sure that people are okay. They refuse to open up the enrollment for the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare, which means that if you have a pre-existing condition, the insurance companies cannot turn you down. If that's tossed out of the law, then everybody that's going through this testing, and you're going to have in what's called your medical files, it's a HIPAA Act also, that doctors protect your medical information, but it's a clue report that's given to insurance companies, and they will know that you've tested positive for something. That's called a pre-existing condition, and now when you go to get the insurance, they can flat out decline you. People need to know that, because I'm sharing something that happened with me the same way that we're asking Jerome Adams to share with more people of color. And I think a lot of the reason that some of our black brethren were being stricken at a higher rate than mainstream population is, and there's a myriad of factors. We can go back to the Kerner report for that. But a lot of times people don't have access to good health care. And even times when we do have access to good health care, sometimes we're naive and we think that God is going to save us. And I do believe that God spared my life that day. This was 5 years ago. So I went and got my medication after the doctor ran some tests. They experimented with different type of blood pressure medication. And my blood pressure right now is right around 120 over 80, or sometimes 118 over 78. One time I even went to the doctor at 16 over 78, and I felt, man, that's kind of low. And the doctor said, no, you're fine. But the point is, I could have been naive. I could have kept praying, or I could have just trusted science. And since I've been on my medication, I haven't had that anomaly anymore. It was the only time in my life I'd ever had it. But my blood pressure was so high, he said, I'm concerned you could have had a stroke. And that's why they call it the silent killer. And I'm sharing that because maybe even if it's just a couple of people that will take heed and take that same message back to people they love, you can pray to God that your medication is good, but don't just turn away on science, because that's my message. And I believe that's why I'm still here to this day. And I really appreciate the doctor that took care of me and ran some tests and said, hey, you can live a long life, but we got to get your blood pressure down. He didn't say you could live a long life if you just pray more. He didn't say you could live a long life if you go to church more. And I know when we talked about Surgeon General Jerome Adams, what message can you give to African Americans? We got to get the medication if you need it. You got to let science be your citadel, if that helps. And then at the end of that, then pray that your medication is going to work. That's my opinion. But if POTUS and Mike Pence want to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, you're going to lose the right to have an insurance company. They can tell you have a pre-existing condition. You took a test for coronavirus and you came back positive. So that could go into your medical records. And anytime you try to get insurance anywhere in the country, they're going to find that you tested positive for coronavirus, and that insurance company can decline you and your family. You think about that as they're still in court trying to get rid of that, what President Obama helped get passed, as they're saying our thoughts and prayers with people. That's real talk. I also want to just make sure that I get that out there. So, Jerome Adams, I believe that your pulpit is a lot bigger than mine. And if we can save lives as opposed to giving thoughts and prayers, let's make sure that people can get the medication that science provides. And that's my opinion. I want to just touch on some things that were happening today in the world of sports. And I love this time of year. It would actually be, if we think about it, today would have been where the get-together for the Masters tonight. Tiger Woods would have hosted the Masters dinner. Now the golf world has to wait to tee off until they're saying right around November of 2020. If science says it's okay, the same way I started taking my blood pressure medication, and now my blood pressure sometimes is 116 over 78, or sometimes 120 over 80. Other times it's 122 over 82. But it's all within that range depending on how much sleep I've had, if I exercise, if I'm having salt or proper rest. Those things are manageable. But at one time it was so high that you would have thought I could run an Indy car race. Big C was so high. And I felt fine until that had that anomaly when I almost passed out in a store about 5 years ago. So I wanted to share that. So in Augusta, Georgia, that's where the Masters was supposed to take place. Obviously, Tiger Woods won it last year, the 2019 Masters, and a lot of people would thought that he was washed up. He had a lot of man-made issues that people tried to bring him down for whatever reason, his own private life that almost every professional athlete and politician has engaged in, even since the days of Melbourne, John F. Kennedy's favorite book. But I believe the man came back and he made it a lot better to watch golf. So he's been, for the most part, quiet since the sports world went on lockdown. And I would love to see how, I know Big C and I say the sports world has a duty also to not have our heads in the sand. And I really want to compliment some of our sports brethren that have access to a microphone on TV or radio. And they don't sound like the dumb jock. Some guys still do. All they do is read about games and they brag about who played a game 10, 15, 20 years ago, and that's okay. Maybe that's just what their ability is. But for the guys who are lucid enough and intellectually stimulating enough to even talk about more, they use more than one side of the brain. And I know people know what I'm saying. I would love to see more of our sports figures do that, because some people don't get the news, but they listen to their sports heroes. In fact, I want to say that I was talking to Big C Sports. I was talking to Big C the other day, and I was saying that Big C Sports is a platform that's not just one side of the brain. We use both sides, the left and right side of the brain. And even sometimes we use the pineal gland, the higher self also, Big C. But that's that subconscious, that intuition that makes you prescient, or you can see things. I hear a lot of people talk about their intuition, how things came to them. Well, I was just saying that the reason I think is important, especially for African Americans, and I've been like this for 5 years really since we started Big C Sports, but when you have the Surgeon General who's African American, Jerome Adams, he's a Surgeon General. Why are African Americans the hardest hit by this coronavirus pandemic? Well, we know for the most part, not a monolithic group, but a lot of people live in these concrete towers where there's not a lot of access to healthy food. And there's a lot of times where people just don't have access to medicine or access to being healthy. And that, to me, it's important that we got to know that. We just got to know it. If we don't know it, if we don't do it now, then when? And so I just wanted to make that known. But Magic Johnson, one of the world's most iconic sports athletes that I respect greatly for what he's done off the court as well as on the court, well, he's going to be in a CNN town hall with Dr. Sanjay Gupta. And I'm proud of that, because here's a man that loves sports. Here's a man who's been very, very successful in the business world. And I appreciate when I can look up and see men who look like me or who look like Big C, and they're not just the shut up and dribble kind of guy, shucking and jiving, and yeah, man, you're right, hey, man, I can't believe how big and strong and fast that guy is. We've seen that all of our lives, but there's an erudite side to our brains also, and I love showing that, not just the athletic side that a lot of guys are praised for. But he's going to be on the town hall with Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and they're talking about coronavirus. Now, people might say, well, why is that important? I'd rather hear a scientist or a doctor talk. You can have both. You can have a right hand and a left hand. So when some people have influence, they may listen to a Magic Johnson who's dealt with his own health issues, and he talked about how he's overcome that with medicine. I'm sure he prayed too, but I'm sure he's also on some strong antivirals that are keeping him healthy. Now, what if we could take that same roadmap and show that to the majority of people in the United States, especially those that are the most hard hit? And I would love to see, I don't know what the show's going to be about, but I would love to see that. Also congratulate, Stephen Curry when he had Dr. Fauci on a program also. I believe it was an Instagram following. And so for people that follow sports athletes, these sports mavens, these guys that may not talk much about politics, but they'll talk about sports, and it makes me almost want to throw up, because I know we're a lot brighter than that as a group of people. We really are. At least I think we are. I can only speak for myself and a few other people. But when I see that he's going to be on, maybe that will get some people into paying attention to what he's going to hear. And maybe because of seeing Magic Johnson, who has a huge platform, that may save some lives, because there's still a lot of young men that I've seen even in Northern California over the past couple of weeks that go out and play basketball together in a city playground. 10, 15 guys on a basketball court, even though we know this social distancing is going on. Now, people can say, I don't believe in that. I'm going to trust God. God is my Savior and all that. I mean, that's fine. But at the same time, we got to let science help us stay alive longer. At least that's my opinion. So with Tiger Woods, it would have been the Champions Dinner, quarantine style. I guess he did some things with his family down in South Florida. But I know a lot of the times when we think about tradition, this Champions Dinner has been a tradition that began at Augusta National in 1952. And I believe it was at the suggestion of Ben Hogan, the only past Masters champions, and the club chairman currently is Fred Ridley, attended the gathering. But how do I tie in Tiger Woods, Magic Johnson, in Big C Sports, and when we talk about sports and coronavirus and pandemics, and how the Surgeon General, Jerome Adams, what can he do to reach into our communities and just pull their attention away, if just for a moment, from the guys who have these fake arguments? I'm going to yell louder than you. Let me tell you how great this basketball player was back in the day. We're going to spend a whole couple of hours on TV trying to get your mind off of that. When I do believe, watching the Michael Jordan thing, fine and dandy if you want to watch that. It's not going to save one life. It's not going to elucidate any subject. It's not going to go in concert with what Surgeon General Jerome Adams espoused just this week about how our communities are hit harder and what we can do to take our head out of the sand and let science come to our rescue. I believe that. I know that history will judge all of us by what we said, not by how big, tall, and fast we were, but what we said, not by how much money's in our bank account, but by what we said. So I'm not saying that Tiger Woods has to be like a Magic Johnson and get on with a show with medical doctors that's going to let them see and answer questions that may just influence some of the people who are the most hard hit by this pandemic. As an African-American man, and I'm able to look at my children, and I want to make sure that I don't try to browbeat them with anything. I want to just point them to the information. They can know how I feel because I don't hide it from the universe. Whatever I'm saying, they can hear it. If they like it or not, they can't say they didn't hear it. And just like my doctor told me, he said, Charlton, why aren't you taking your medication? And I believe this conversation, I remember it so well because I felt embarrassed to say this. And I said, well, doctor, I grew up in a house of faith, even though we're on medication, but I believe that God's going to solve this. He's going to cure it. I was reading, Matthew 7:7, ask and ye shall receive, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto me. I was reading Isaiah 54:17, that no weapon formed against me shall prosper. I was reading all the biblical things that's put a lot of our community in peril. I know it really has. Because I can almost guarantee, and I can't really guarantee with factual knowledge, but I believe this. If we were to go to these communities where a lot of people are hardest hit, they may have a Bible in their household, but they may not have the medical care or the medical insurance. You know that card when you go to the doctor? They don't ask you, do you have a Bible? When you check in the doctor's office, they don't ask you if you have a Bible when you take your kids to the doctor. They don't. They've never asked me, do you have a Bible, Charlton? Can you tell me what scripture this is? What chapter and verse? They don't say that. They say, let me see your insurance card. Who do you have for insurance? And that will keep us alive longer. I believe that, and I want to say it's okay to have faith, but we got to have both. So I hope that the Magic Johnson series of being on with the town hall with the Sanjay Gupta, and I believe it's going to be on Thursday on CNN. People can Google that. I want to do my part, Big C, when we were seeing what Surgeon General Joe Mattis can do. We got to do our part, too, and not just wait on other people. I do want to talk a little bit more about golf and how I wish that Tiger Woods would also come out of that shell. Because a lot of people, he may be the most popular athlete in the universe. I mean, all over the world. You think about that. And as a man of color who grew up in a family, you could just say a biracial family. There's only one race of people. We all just have different skin melanin. But imagine, because they look like the communities that's hit hardest by this. When you're watching that thing that Michael Jordan's going to have put on, I mean, that's fine if that's what you want to do. Take your mind off of what's going on in society. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not going to save any lives. It's not going to elucidate any subjects. It's not going to talk to us about how we need health care. It's not going to talk to anybody about how we need science. They're going to ogle over some erstwhile athletes about what they used to do and how big and strong and fast they were and how they won championships, and people are dying at the highest rate, and they look just like those guys. And to me, that hurts, because if we don't save our young African-American boys and girls, who's going to? We know the prison industrial complex has been unfairly targeting African Americans. We know that. That's not a fallacy. We know they're 10 times more likely to be falsely accused of something, 7 times more likely than a white child to be expelled from school, mostly by a white teacher. They don't turn their kids into the criminal justice complex the way they do black kids. They know that. I know that too. I went to school around that same garbage. I saw guys that would pat me on the back when I played football in high school and college. But outside of that, for the most part, people love to be around you when you can benefit them. And I'm just saying, if we don't do it, then shame on us for having a platform. I know a lot of people are afraid of their boss. Oh, Massa. Hey, Massa, can I please say anything that will elucidate the subject that may keep my grandmother safe, my mother safe, my father, my grandfather, my family, my children, myself? No, boy, just go talk about basketball. Talk about some erstwhile athlete and how great he was 30 years ago. Even though the most people who are dying from the coronavirus pandemic at a disproportionate amount are African Americans. And you would think, since they've allowed our sports heroes to be the guys that you look at and see on TV more, you don't see as many news reporters as you see athletes. You don't see as many African American doctors as you see athletes. The Surgeon General of the United States of America is an African American man. He went to Cal Berkeley, and he went to a couple of other schools. And most people don't know him, but they know who Michael Jordan is. They know who Magic Johnson is. And I believe, just like the story I'm telling about my own personal story, when I almost passed out in a store about 5 years ago because of blood pressure that I did not have under control. You couldn't tell I was high blood pressure. I looked great. I mean, people told me that, and I know that because I know I've been around athletes all my life. I know I looked fine. That's why I was shocked. Like, how could I have it? Look at how I look. And everybody knows that it's not about the size of your body, or the looks can be deceiving. It's about when they put that blood pressure, that systolic and diastolic pressure, that's what keeps you alive. And I think that's part of what's happening with the calamity in the African American community that a lot of people are not on medication. They're on a prayer ritual. And when they get hurt or when they get hit by it, they end up passing out. Or maybe they get to the doctor too late and too much damage is done. I'm so passionate about that. I'm going to take what's called the Big C Pause, also the Big C Timeout. When we come back, we're going to talk more about why we need to get to the doctor and how can athletes also have an impart and an input on how we can make our community safer. We know a lot of people look to athletes when they don't look to science. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big C Timeout, also known as the Big C Pause. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com. You can follow Big C Sports on 2 apps that I love called Google. Our Alexa, just say Google. Our Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he will do his thing from 3,000 miles away. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you got to have a smart TV or it may not work for you. Looking at launching a real estate listing show in the spring of 2020. The goal is simple: recruit 100 real estate brokers, put your properties on TV, and you can get more business that way. You can also do refinancing. There's a lot of things that we can do, and that's part of the Big C team. I want to get on this story again about why it's important. And Big C, I was thinking about it when we had the conversation yesterday about what it's going to take to make all communities better, but why is it the African American community has been hit hardest by this pandemic? And I know that growing up, there's a lot of people who have a Bible, but they don't have an insurance card, or they're told to go down and get on the government's program, but you may not get the same help. So whatever it is, Obamacare is not perfect, but it's more perfect than the guy that don't have insurance. It may be at times cost prohibitive, but there are things we can do to bring down the cost. You know, you can buy gas now for about $2 in California. If you're buying premiums, about $2.67, and just about a month ago, it's about almost $4 for premium. Things change. We can do the same thing with healthcare if we have a heart for it. I want to look at the top 4 golfers in the history of the universe and how sports has shaped the realities for so many people, because our sports heroes, oftentimes people will listen to them and not others. I look at a guy like Arnold Palmer. There have been better players and better swings, but there's never been someone at that time, in the words of some, that were as good as Arnold Palmer. From 1958 to 1968, Arnold reigned amid the best players to ever play in Augusta National. You know, it's amazing. When you think about what he did as a golfer, he never had to deal with the racial enmity. Could you imagine some of our great athletes over the world? Like I mentioned, Tiger Woods, mainstream media tried to bring him down because of what he did in his private life. That many people in that industry, they have wives and girlfriends. I'm not dropping any names, but people know that's true, especially the golfers that know it's true. And none of them came to Tiger's aid and say, hey, that's not cool. Because they could have also ostracized those reporters that came chasing around to see what Tiger was doing when they didn't know what their own wives were doing. While you're out looking at Tiger Woods, seeing who he's with, who is your wife with? Some of these reporters that were out there saying, I can't believe Tiger Woods was doing that. And they've been doing it since the Middle Passage. I don't like that, and I'll always shout it down. People can do what they want to do. But at the same time, as great as Arnold Palmer was, you can't tell me that he and Tiger are in the same industry and don't have the same habits. But they've always protected the image of certain people. Why not Tiger? And it goes back into what I was saying earlier. Why is it that many African Americans have succumbed? If you believe what they're telling you in the news cycles, and I believe that the Surgeon General wouldn't lie about this, why have they been hit harder in the African American communities? Not a monolithic group. Lack of health care, lack of access to health care, oftentimes working in service industry jobs where you're coming in contact with a lot of people. And then we know sometimes the stress levels of always trying to deal with reality. sometimes being stalked on and racially profiled, over years that can add up, that can build up high blood pressure. That can build up high blood pressure as much as eating bad food can build up blood pressure, as much as a bad diet. I mean, there's so many things that people of color have to deal with. The great Arnold Palmer never had to deal with that, even though he became a great golfer. 60 PGA Tour wins, 7 major championships, 4-time PGA Tour money champ, first PGA Tour millionaire, 15 consecutive years with at least one victory. That's the great Arnold Palmer. He was never racially profiled. He was never told, we don't want any whites allowed here. You're white, you can't join this organization. The sponsors won't buy into it. He was never booed and cheered because he was Caucasian. Never happened to him. And so you look at some of the African-American men that have also tried to play in the world of golf, and they haven't had the same easy road that a lot of our white brethren. I want to look at the great Sam Snead, one of the top golfers in the history of the universe. I know that Masters is not being played right now. They're trying to push it back to November of this year, and they want to compete with actually NFL football and college football if we get it. We don't know if it's going to happen. Look at the great Sam Snead, a record 82 PGA Tour wins spanning from 1936 to 1965, 7 major championships, including 3 Masters and 3 PGA championships, the oldest player to win, make a cut, and shoot his age in PGA Tour history. He posted 10 top 10s in major 5 different decades. In 5 different decades, posted the top 10. That's incredible. But you know what he didn't have to do? You know what the great Sam Snead never had to deal with? He never had to deal with someone saying, you're not welcome at this club because you're white. He never had to deal with the police officers rolling down the neighborhood, wondering, what are you doing in this neighborhood? What are you doing over here? They didn't have to deal with that. He didn't have to deal with being racially profiled by our criminal justice system. When Bloomberg and POTUS were doing their stop and frisk in New York City, he didn't have to deal with the stop and frisk. He didn't have to deal with it. All he had to do was show up and play golf. So some of the pressures that guys like Jackie Robinson dealt with, these great white golfers never had to deal with that. There's no asterisk next to their name when we say how great they are, and it's part of the Masters tournament that has been an exclusive club for people who are not of color. Now, I'm not saying that I can change history, but I just want to shine my light on it because I'm talking about how can we keep our African American community safer. I mean, all people matter. But when the Surgeon General says that we're hit harder by the coronavirus pandemic than other groups, why is that? It's not just one thing. It's not just because we don't have insurance. It's not because we pray too much. Sometimes there's pressures built up on people, and it comes out some way. It's going to come out somehow, and people know what it is. That's why we had such white flight when a lot of times people would just take you and tell you, no, you're not going to get what we have. There was a black stock market down in Tulsa, Oklahoma in the 30s, and some lynchmen burned it down. They burned down the city, several square blocks. And there was also one in Sacramento, California, and several other parts of the United States. It was called the black stock market, the Black Wall Street, because there were a lot of wealthy people. There was even a town down in Oklahoma where I believe there were 12 private jets in that town, and I believe 6 were owned by African Americans. This was back in the 30s. But people resented black progress. So even when I speak on the Big C Sports Show, to me, I don't care if people like it or not. I just say what I feel is factual. You can Google what I say. If I'm not credible, don't ever listen to me again. But if I am, maybe check yourself and see how we can all participate in making life better. I've never been a woman, but I've always advocated for women. You can advocate for anybody when you know what's right. And I love doing that. I want to look at some of the top golfers in the history of the universe now that we're pining over the Masters and what made them so great. As I mentioned, how can we keep our whole society focused on how we get healthier through this pandemic? The great Jack Nicklaus, everybody has their own opinion about who the great actors are in Hollywood, who the great athletes are in the sports world. Everybody has their opinion. But when you think about the great Jack Nicklaus, it's so much about what he had to do back in the day, but he was given that favoritism by society, and that helped him also. He didn't have that extra baggage to carry with him even subconsciously. Nicklaus, winner of 73 PGA Tour events, including a record 18 major championships, the winner of a record 6 Masters. He finished in the top 5 in majors a record 56 times, and the top 10 a record 73 times. That good old boy could golf. He posted the lowest scoring average on tour 8 times. He won PGA Tour money title 8 times. He won at least 2 PGA Tour events in 17 consecutive seasons from 1962 to 1978. That's incredible. You know what the great Jack never faced? He never faced, boy, you can't play in this country club. Boy, you can't join this tournament. He was never racially profiled. He never faced discrimination because he was white. No one ever told him, you're white, we're not going to give you the endorsements. No one ever said we're not going to play with him because we don't like his skin color. He was pretty much praised all of his life. No fault of his own. Sure, he's a decent man, but he knows that's true. And that's why I ask all of our brethren to shout down knuckleheads. I think it was Dr. King that said, the universe, talking about the arc of justice, bends toward justice. It bends toward doing the right thing. And if you know of bad things going on, and you say nothing about how to fix it, then you're part of the problem. It means you tacitly consent to it. And I think our sports figures, as people are opining what's going on with sports now, oh my God, we don't have sports. How can I function? I don't have a game to watch. I can't see guys run around the field. What am I going to do with my time? I really have heard, Big C, I know you might laugh, but I've heard people saying that on different programs because they know they love this business, and so do I. But I also love life. And when I heard Surgeon General Jerome Adams, and when he spoke, he was speaking to me. He was speaking to my father. He was speaking to my grandfather. Speaking to my brothers, my sisters, my children. What can we do if God has given us access to a microphone? Are we just going to shut up and dribble? Are we going to just ogle over some erstwhile athlete or how great he was when the house was burning and the floods came and the winds blew and the pandemic spread all over the planet? And we have guys that are just saying, hey man, I can't wait till this show comes on. I want to see this guy jump and dunk a basketball. And we could use our airwaves, you know, when we breathe. Not everybody has to like it. But if we want to keep people breathing, we got to make sure that we get them some help and get them access to health care. We can't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. That would be criminal. In fact, it would be negligent. You know, people who need that are counting on our leadership to get us all some health care. It should be a right as an American citizen. They have it in Canada. You tell me we can't do as well as Canada, our brethren up north? I mean, we have people all over the world that have access to some form of health care. Even if you just go down to the general hospital and fall down, they'll eventually get to you. But we know our multimillionaire athletes and our multimillionaire movie stars, they can get a test to see if they're positive for anything when a lot of poor people can't do that. And to me, I want to be, at least with my breath, I want to at least start that conversation that we've heard for many, many years. But President Obama is the only president in the history of the United States that was able to get health care passed. Isn't that something? The only one. And the guy coming right after him, after he finished looking for his birth certificate, is deciding I'm going to take it away. And then they'll stand at the lectern and tell people that our thoughts and prayers are with you, and we want to get everybody tested. Well, what if you don't have insurance? What do you say to those people? You going to have them pray in the Bible? I mean, we got to always do our part. I want to make sure I do my part. I'm not trying to be like everybody else in front of a microphone. God knows that we're all accountable for what we do and say. When we talked about golf and how we're missing the Masters right now, I want to say the number one golfer in the history of the universe. And the hourglass is still counting. The great Tiger Woods. You think about this. In 1997, he became the guy that was known all over the world as a must-see golfer in the world of golf. Whenever he played, everybody came to the TV. Why is that? There's so many reasons, because golf had been such a discriminatory game, and it just based on your skin color. Jack knows what I'm talking about. The great Sam Snead knew. All the guys knew. Watson, they all knew. Faldo, they all knew. And even though today there are people who won't say publicly what they'll say privately, there's still some disdain and some pushback for people who ascend up that corporate ladder. And it's just a matter of how we take the time to acknowledge people for what they've done. I'm not a sycophant to any athlete, but I do love this business. And that's why, if in my opinion, Big C Sports opinion, Tiger Woods has been the best golfer in the history of the universe, because everyone you compare him against, they've already retired. They're already done or passed on. But he's still writing the records. 82 PGA Tour wins, tied for most all-time with Sam Snead. 15 major championships, second all-time to the great Jack Nicklaus. Only one, think about this, the only player to ever win 4 consecutive majors. The only one in the history of the universe. That's the great Tiger Woods. The lowest scoring average in PGA Tour history, the lowest in the history of the game. You think about that. Scoring average of 67.79 in 2000, in the 2000s up to 2009, and the lowest single season average in tour history. In the history of the game, a PGA Tour Player of the Year, a record 10 times. And I would love if Tiger Woods, maybe he's shy, maybe he's reticent, but I would love if he would take what the world has given him, in fact, what the universe has given him, and he's earned it on the golf course. I would love to see if he had, and I can't make anybody do anything. All I can do is do my part. That's why I talk about it on the show. I don't say that other sports shows should do something that I'm not doing. I try to do some of both. I use my left and my right brain. I use both. Even my higher self, my subconscious, the pineal gland, as some people call it. But I know it's not for everybody. I know when the floods come and the house is on fire and the pandemic sweeping the planet, I know some people would say, man, I don't want to hear from you about what your thoughts are on how to solve a pandemic. Just give me the score. They got to change the channel, because I don't care about that. I care about doing what I feel is right, and everybody has a right to their opinion. That's my opinion. I'd never want to be just a sycophant. So even without the Masters, the 2020 Masters Championship, I still would love to see Tiger Woods just step up to the plate and even give a PSA about what it takes to stay safe. I mean, he got a Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Trump. At the same time, President Trump is suing to get Obamacare tossed out of the court system. Isn't that something? Going to court to get it done. It's not going to happen, but you can see where the man's heart is. To take millions of people off of the roll of having access to better health care. We can work on how to make it more affordable, but don't get rid of it. Not when people are needing some type of help to make sure their families live a healthier life. This is what I want to get into. I know we're missing the Masters, and it's a little bit different than what mainstream is doing, because they're mostly patting you on the back and telling you how great somebody is. I'm not perfect. I have my own problems. But I can also say I can reach to a higher self, ask God for faith and for prayer, and ask other people who are intelligent, can we all, when smart people talk, things get better? I do believe that, and it's been that way all my life. So even without the 2020 Masters Championships, Big C's thoughts on some of the similar moments for Black Americans to play golf in the United States against all odds that Jack never faced, Nicklaus never faced it, Arnold Palmer never faced it, Sam Snead never faced it. But there are a number of African American golfers that love the game as much as anybody does. There was a picture where Tiger Woods was speaking to Charlie Sifford, the first African American inducted into the World Golf Hall of Fame, during a practice round. It was in 2009 at the WGC Bridgestone Invitational. And when you think about golf, it's a game that a lot of people can play, but oftentimes people of color, my white brethren, whether they believed in God or not, they were just making it difficult for people to play. Going back to 1899, George Grant, a dentist in Boston, invents the modern wooden golf tee. When you go out and golf, and you put the tee in the ground, and you put the ball on top of the tee, black men invented that. Think about that. And then people who look like him went on to be told, you can't play here. We don't want you on this course. It's all part of life and how we can still try to push for that excellence. Robert Hawkins, 1926, stages his first tournament for African-American players. He staged another in 1927, and in 1928 creates the United Golf Associations, which ultimately established a tour for players excluded from PGA events. They were excluded from it. Think about that. 1939, Clyde Martin is named head professional at the segregated Langston Golf Course in Washington, D.C., not far from POTUS, where he would go on to become the Joe Louis golf instructor. I mean, there's so many times when people would say, well, why aren't more African-American kids playing golf? There's sometimes when people don't want you there. People made it difficult. They didn't give you the same treatment that they gave their white brethren. So everybody knows that it's important to know this stuff. 1946, returning home to East Canton, Ohio, after serving in the U.S. Air Force. My father also served in the Air Force. He was an airline mechanic, worked on jet engines. William Powell is denied a GI loan for his plan to build a golf course. Powell secures funding from 2 African-American physicians, while his brothers take out a second mortgage on his home and builds Clearview Golf Club with his own hands. He becomes the only African-American to build, to own, and operate a golf course. That's so important. In 1948, William Powell's Clearview Golf Club opens to the public as a 9-hole course. I think everybody wonders why, if we're men of color, we can't afford just to shut up and dribble. We can't afford just to have these made-up arguments about who could jump higher, who could run faster, who could shoot the ball better, because we have 2 sides of the brain, the left and the right side, and even the pineal gland, that subconscious part. If we act like we're intellectually vapid, that we're just, this aggressive body of muscle that we can only, shut up and dribble, then why would other people respect us as a group? No one can ever listen to Big C Sports and say we're not well read. They may not like it. They may call us uppity. They may say, man, you guys talk too much politics. But no one can ever say you're not well read. They will never be able to say that. And I hope that other young African Americans can find that strength inside of you, like a Surgeon General Jerome Adams, and talk about what we need to do to stay healthy, to live a better life. All of us have to do that. It's not always going to be easy, but sometimes if we don't wag our own tail, nobody else will. 1964, Pete Brown becomes the first African American player to win a PGA sanctioned event, the Waco Turner Open. He also wins the 1970 Andy Williams San Diego Invitational. That's important. In 1978, William Powell, he expands Clearview Golf Club to 18 holes. Remember, this was first started because African Americans were told no. They didn't tell Nicholas no. They didn't tell Faldo no. They didn't tell any of those guys no. They didn't tell Snead no. They just didn't do it. It's so important. 1979, Calvin Peete wins the 1979 Greater Milwaukee Open, the first of his 12 career PGA Tour victories. He was the most prolific African-American winner until the great Tiger Woods came along, the best golfer in the universe. I hope that we can take a platform of African-Americans who've been given access to the airways, and let's not turn our back on people who are marginalized, to only listen to people that tell them that, well, just keep waiting. Now's not the time. You don't want to rush too fast. People aren't ready for change. If people aren't ready for change, get them out of the way. What if we heard from a great business leader? Either lead, follow, or get out of the way. 1979, Lee Elder becomes the first African American to play in the Ryder Cup. I think that's important because as we talk about the Masters and how we're missing the Masters, they would have had the dinner today. There's a history of African Americans that we can't be silent. Not if we want a legacy of doing the right thing. Like Dr. King, people told Dr. King, you need to shut up, man. Just pray. Don't talk about having the right to vote and live where you want to live and get bank loans and home loans and go to different school districts. Don't talk about that stuff. Just shut up and dribble. And because he spoke up, a lot of us now, we have the opportunity to live where we want to live, work where we want to love, even have the number one sports show in the universe, Big C Sports Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the number one podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on two apps that I love called Google or Alexa. Play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic from 3,000 miles away, and he will do his thing, and I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe, and I really appreciate that. I just want to make sure that people understand, yeah, we all miss the Masters, but none of our great white golfers have ever faced discrimination. They were never told, you're white, you're not wanted here, you can't join this club because it's not for white people. And people got to know that. I'm asking every one of my white brethren, when you think about that, how often are you told no because you're white? A lot of people think they have what they have because they worked hard, or they just got the right education and they put their head to the grindstone and they did it. But they didn't get told no because you're white. You know, that still goes on in our society. And I know a lot of people have those private conversations at the dinner table and around the couch when nobody's around. But people that are dumb enough to listen without objecting to it, or saying, hey, that's wrong, that's not right, and then go to church anyway. I mean, I just believe that, and people know it's true. 2018, Renee Powell becomes the first African American to have a residence hall named in her honor by the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. Think about that. First American, just happened to be African American. So everybody has this hope that life will get better through this coronavirus pandemic. I really wanted to take some time today to focus on what's happening with the Masters. I know there's some guys that talked about Tom Brady and, changing teams, etc. Congratulations to that. We'd still love to see some of our athletes with a bigger platform than Big C Sports to just make sure that we are reaching out. And when we reach out to the black community, we help grandfathers. We help grandmothers. We help mothers. We help fathers. We help wives. We help girlfriends. We help daughters, sisters, nieces. I wish my niece happy birthday today. She never has to wonder why she has an intellectually vapid uncle who won't say what he knows is right that may make life better for her. My kids don't have that either. I'm just saying everybody has their own style. And I just hope and pray that if anyone that wants to find out what Surgeon General Jerome Adams said, why is that true? Why are we the most affected by this coronavirus pandemic? I believe it's a lack of access to the healthcare system. Or sometimes we have too much faith over science. I was that way myself, and it almost cost me. I feel great because I listen to science also. I still pray a lot. I just want to make sure that if anyone comes within earshot of Big C Sports, they don't hear me arguing about what player is bigger, stronger, and faster than somebody else. And I can't wait to see this guy play because I really love seeing him play, and it makes me so happy. I mean, everybody has their own thoughts. Again, I want to remind people coming up Thursday, tomorrow, Magic Johnson, one of the best iconic athletes in the history of the universe, is going to be on CNN with Dr. Sanjay Gupta at a town hall, and they're talking about the coronavirus and how it's, whatever they're going to talk about, I don't know. But I do believe that a lot of people know who Magic Johnson is, and they don't know who Surgeon General Jerome Adams is. So we can put that out there and let more people know that we are part of a solution that says let's have dialogue. People don't have to always like what you say. But if we, as men of color, we owe that to the next generation, that they did not just inherit somebody who was arguing about who's bigger, stronger, and faster. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the number one podcast network in the universe, Big C Sports Podcast and iHeartRadio Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and so many other podcasts. Big C, as I always say, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use How can you lose? Rumble, young men, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe? I'm hoping that everybody can have dialogue on what it takes to keep our people safe. Every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide, follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And as we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you, on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.